Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi.
This is a recently established tradition. The first time that we mentioned it was last week.
Instant classic.
And I think it's because I got a long ride home, with, two of us on the horse riding back to Bernie at night. Coming down here, they had a truck with a house on it or something. It was all wrapped up, so you couldn't actually see it was a house, but it was huge and it was really heavy, going 25 miles an hour, and burning his brakes out. Every time he'd get to a place where he'd put his brakes on, you could smell rubber and couldn't see for a half a mile. Anyway, we made it, because some crazy person tried to pass him and got in between him and the pilot car, so the pilot car pulled over and then we made it down. Made me wish that I was back up on the ranch in Montana, or riding herd. The only thing is when you ride herd, you start to miss the ladies, and if you just, that kind of lifestyle too, a lot of the ladies you meet are all the ones that hang out in saloons, so when you decide to settle down, you don't always know exactly how to communicate with a woman or how to treat them right, because you've just been hanging out with cows all the time and horses. Anyway, that reminds me of Jack Potter. Jack Potter was a man who knew his horses, from the bird tails in their hairy nests to the ticks that chawed their necks. He was a Texican and a cowhand to the saddle, bred and born. He could count a trail herd on the move and never miss a horn. But one day on the tally, back in 1884, he got to acting real dreamy, and he sure did miss the score. Now the boss, he recognized the symptoms, and he said, "Jack, you ain't no good like this. I'm going to give you 10 days to ride out and find out what's amiss." Well, it was amiss that ailed him, for he fell in love for sure with a gal named Courtin, who was pretty, sweet, pure. So old Jack rode out 100 miles, a-sweating at the thought of sweets and things to tell her the way a feller ought. Like, "I'm just a humble cowboy, ma'am. Here upon my, just a humble cowboy, Miss Courtin, if you please. Here to ask your heart and hand upon my bended knees." It all sounded so simple, rehearsed upon the trail, but when he got to Miss Courtin's door, the words all seemed to fail. It was, "Howdy, miss, how's your ma and pa, and how's the crops? How's your ma and pa?" But when it came to asking her, he just couldn't come to talk. He took her to a dance one night, and the horse she rode was his. "Sure is a dandy hoss," she says, and Jack replies, "It is." Well, when they were coming home, and the moon was on the rise, Jack, he got to talking about the stars up in the skies, and how they could guide a trail herd just like they would sailing ships. But words of love and marriage, they just wouldn't pass his lips. So Jack started talking about the horse she was riding. Said, "You notice he's fancy gaited and never fights to keep his head. Sure is a dandy hoss." And then she let out a sigh. Jack said, "Well, this hoss could be yours. I mean, maybe when I die." He figured she might savvy what he meant, or maybe guess, and give him that sweet answer that he longed for, namely yes. But still, by the time they got home, back to the ranch house, he still was wondering how he'd ever pop the question. And he had to do it now, or he'd have to wait and sweat and suffer till the trail ride ended in the fall. And by then she might be married, and he'd lose her after all. Well, they got to the ranch house. He took off the saddle, led his pony up to the gate, said, "I guess I'd best be drifting, man, because it's kind of getting late." And her eyes just shone like starlight, and her lips were as sweet as flowers. Jack looks at her and goes, "Now, Courtin, this here pony, is it mine or is it ours?" "It's ours, Jack," she said, and her voice was as sweet as moss. Now then, Jack, he claims he kissed her, but she claims he kissed the hoss. The other thing, you know, about working on her hands, you know, the most important guy, of course, is the boss. You don't always see him, but the foreman. And then the real guy who is really important is the cook, right? So sometimes they hire some interesting cooks like old Boomer Johnson. Too bad Boomer's not here today. I think he would enjoy this one. But Boomer Johnson, he was a man who was getting old in spots. But who would ever thought that a bad man would want to wrestle pans and pots? But he has his share of killing, and his draw was getting slow, so he gave up punching cattle and he started punching dough. Now our foreman ups and hires him because he figured maybe time had rode him tame. But I tell you, a snake don't get no sweeter just by changing of his name. Now this Boomer, he knew his business. He could cook to make you smile. But the thing was, he stirred his fodder in a most peculiar style. He didn't use no matches. He just left them on the shelf. Just kerosene and cussing, and the kindling lit itself. And folks, I tell you, it would give a man a jolt to watch him stir frijoles with the barrel of his Colt. Because you know, killing, man, and cooking, it's really not that far apart. And I guess that's why Boomer took to practice in this art. He could use the sight on his barrel and cut a pie crust real quick. And then he'd crimp it with his muzzle just to make the edges stick. And his donuts, he made them whole. And it sure would curl your hair to watch him shoot those donuts when he throw them in the air. He could plug them dead center every time his pistol spoke, till the whole till the can was full of donuts and the shack was full of smoke. And we'd start getting jumpy, and he couldn't understand why his pistol made us nervous when his cooking was so grand. So he just kept on performing, and it came as no surprise when he started marking tombstones on the covers of his pies. Now his cooking didn't taste no better and it didn't taste no worse, but sitting in that kitchen was like sitting in a hearse. We didn't do no talking. We just took what we got and ate till we were bellered just to keep from getting shot. But then one bright morning at breakfast, I was kind of feeling low. Boomer passed the donuts and I told him plenty. No, just coffee this trip. Because my stomach is a wreck. And then I saw the urge for killing start swelling the wattles in his neck. Scored my cooking. Started slinging donuts on the barrel of his gun and shoved it in my gizzard and said, "You're taking one." Yeah, Boomer was set to start a graveyard. But for once, he was mistook. Because me, not wanting donuts, I just up and salts the cook. Did they fire him? I tell you folks, nothing left to fire. Just a row of smiling faces and another cook for hire. And if he's with another outfit, I mean, if he's cooking, but what I'm trying to say is, it's where they don't need no matches. No, if he's with another outfit and cooking, well, here's what I mean. It's where they got no matches and they don't need no kerosene. The first poem was by a guy by the name of S. Omar Barker, who was the poet laureate of New Mexico. The second one was by somebody named Knibbs. Don't know that much about him. This one's by me. This one's called One West. You know, I was riding out in the ravine one day. I came across a rattlesnake. A pony reared off, threw me off, and left me there to bake. Broke my leg. Couldn't move a lick. That snake just slithered up and bit me real quick. Tried to get up, but with that venom in my vein, my bones started rattling, and I thought I was going insane. I look up, and there was an old Blackfoot with an eagle feather hanging from his gray head. I sort of lay back down on the ground because I figured soon I'd be dead. But when I woke up, there's a fire burning bright, and this old man was sitting there, shimmering in the light. He said, "I set your leg and sucked the venom out, and now I'm going to tell you what this is all about." You see, when I was a young brave, hunting bighorn sheep, I slipped on a ledge and fell into a crevice, sharp and deep. And an old trapper happened by, saved my life. And now I feel that the Great Spirit has brought me here somehow to even the score. What I'm trying to say is I'm staying here till you get well, and then I'll be on my way. Now, you know, folks, that's not the only time that my life has been saved by a man who wasn't white. There was a crazy old Mexican who backed me up in a nasty barroom fight. And I traveled herd with a buffalo cowboy, and we got awful tight, swapping tales about our lives beneath the starry light. So what I'm saying is I figure this here land has been made by all kinds of men. And women too, I reckon, of all kinds of kin and kin. So when it comes to Brandon, folks, I feel that it's best to be like the Lord. You'll love them all and let the squabbles rest. Thank you.